let's just say if I had $1 million in cash or $100,000 to invest, what would I put that in right now? It would probably be 50% cash, 20% gold, and then the rest in crypto. The asymmetric return opportunity for crypto is something that you would be silly to miss out on, even if it's just 2, 3, 4, 5% of your portfolio. Anyone who thinks they know what's going to happen next with the stock market or with money is giving you their best guess, and you need to understand that it is nothing other than a guess.
Opportunity is everywhere. We live in a society now, not everyone, but so many people don't want to work for it. So many people want that instant gratification. No one wants to put in the time, the effort, the grind, the hustle, the extra hours to achieve their goals and be willing to sacrifice. Unfortunately, we live in a country where people don't want to sacrifice.
I had this opportunity to host the first public speech of Steve Jobs after he was fired from Apple.
Wow.
And so a lot of folks don't appreciate, but Steve had scaled in his 20s a company 8x.
Wow.
That of what Bill Gates had, same age. We talk about in our book that there are 4 components: people, strategy, execution, and cash. And the question always is, which one of those is more important? All 4 matter equally. It's like a table with 4 legs. If you're missing one of them, it's just not going to be as stable. But he found a 5th that trumped them all. I even went back and re-edited my book because I had missed that. And it was market timing.
Welcome to episode 6 of our 9-part docuseries, Money Revealed 2020. Loving the feedback, loving the engagement. Thank you so much for being here. And make sure you're not just a passive viewer, but you're engaging in this information. You're sharing it with people. It matters. The world is a freaky, strange place right now, you have to admit. And a lot of people are getting paralyzed. They're not sure what to do. And when fear is driving the system, the outcomes are never good. When you are empowered with information, when you have consolidated insights from great experts, let me tell you, that's life-changing. And that's why we made this. We want it to be life-changing. During the free viewing period, which we're still in right now, you can own Money Revealed 2020 with some spectacular bonuses at very, very affordable prices. There's different packages. Go ahead and check it out on this page. Pick the one that's right for you. Invest in it and have this information to go back to over and over again. It's going to pay dividends for you well into the future. So we have a big lineup coming up for episode 6. Let's jump right into it. In the entrepreneurial world, especially the online entrepreneurial world, pretty much everybody knows Mike Dillard. This interview with Mike Dillard is something that is going to share past victories and defeats, which I think is important to learn from, and it has a fresh perspective on what's going on right now and the types of things that you need to be considering. I follow Mike Dillard. He puts out great information all the time. He especially is focusing in one area that I have a great interest in, which is crypto and what the future of that is and how that might relate to the markets, etc. Mike is brutally honest, he's very transparent, and there's a lot to learn from him. So enjoy this interview with Mike Dillard. Mike, I'm always appreciative of our ongoing conversations. The world is very fluid, especially when it comes to entrepreneurism and money and investment.
Yep.
And so we've had conversations pre-COVID, in the midst of the crisis, and now we're still sort of in the midst of it in a very tumultuous time, election season and Supreme Court justices, and all the fury and the fight around that. So we're looking to update people on kind of what are you seeing and what are you thinking when it comes to money and investment.
Toss a coin.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an unbelievably tumultuous time. And what's really interesting, I don't know if this has come up with any of our previous guests in this series or not, but a book that really laid out exactly what's been taking place for the last 10 years. It was written 30 years ago, called The Fourth Turning. And
It has not come up, incidentally. So
yeah, so I discovered this book after the crash of 2008, and it was written by two scientists who wanted to answer the question of why does history seem to repeat itself? And they went back and did the most extensive study that's ever been done on human history to really answer that question. And what they discovered is that humans do tend to express themselves and live out these cycles every 80 to 100 years. So 4 generations, average 25 years every generation. So every 80 to 100 years, you would see this same cycle repeat. And they essentially divided it into 4 seasons. So spring, summer, fall, and winter. And they call winter the fourth turning. And we're at the fourth turning, and we are entering our essentially fourth turning. We started this back in 2000, I believe, 7. And in the book, again, this was written 30 years ago, we're going to enter the fourth turning around 2007. It's going to be precipitated by the stock market crash around real estate. This is going to happen, that's going to happen, et cetera, and this is going to go on till about the year 2025. And they said the next big crash around the year 2020 is going to have another big market crash. This time it's going to be caused by a global pandemic.
Really?
This was written 30 years ago.
This is in the book?
It's in the book.
Wow.
And
how could he have known that?
Going back through history.
Because these are scientists, not psychics, right?
Exactly, exactly. And researchers. And the scary part about the core message in The Fourth Turning, it's a pretty extensive book. If you read the first chapter, you'll get it. It was essentially written as a warning to humanity. And the warning is the fact that every fourth turning has so far throughout history ended in war. And this will be the first fourth turning that takes place where nuclear weapons are a part of the equation.
Wow.
And so they basically said, hey, let's have some awareness around this cycle. Let's bring it to an end before it ends us. And so far it's happening like clockwork, which is really scary and really interesting. So
scary for sure.
Yeah.
And suddenly you get people's attention when you say they predicted the pandemic as part and parcel to the whole thing. So that's disturbing. So does that cause you to maybe say you're staying very liquid, you're not investing in anything right now, or how does that influence your behaviors financially?
Yes. Right now, let's just say if I had $1 million in cash or $100,000 to invest, what would I put that in right now? It would probably be 50% cash, 20% gold, and then the rest in crypto. And that for me is a really high risk portfolio, but that's what I know best, so I feel very safe with that. But yeah, I would be in cash right now. I think having the optionality to wait and see what happens, because at the end of the day, you could ask me, what do you think is going to happen? I can tell you what I think is going to happen. It means absolutely nothing. And that goes for anybody else and what they say. Anyone who thinks they know what's going to happen next with the stock market or with money is giving you their best guess, and you need to understand that it is nothing other than a guess.
Yeah.
And so I think having the option of cash is one of the smartest moves. At the same time, I look from a macro perspective. We talked about this last time, the birth of cryptocurrency and the role that that's playing. Today, as we see hyperinflation start to kick in countries like Venezuela, which is taking place right now, Bitcoin is really an X factor in this equation that literally did not exist 10 years ago. And on one hand, Bitcoin itself is playing a fascinating role in that it tends to look like it is going to become a digital version of gold. And at the same time, the blockchain tech that runs crypto, Bitcoin, is creating all kinds of decentralized applications that are going to be used from an economic perspective. Just this last year, in the last 12 months, we've seen the birth of DeFi, decentralized finance. And so we've seen...
What does that mean, decentralized finance?
We've seen engineers, software engineers and developers. Usually these are just 1 or 2 individuals who are brilliant people sitting at their home computer, writing out this transparent code, creating a blockchain around it that essentially replaces a service that is traditionally provided by a bank. And so there are decentralized banking applications or finance applications that provide lending now. So you can put in crypto, Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever you want into this decentralized application. So nobody owns it, nobody controls it, and it's fully transparent so everybody understands how it works. It can't be shut down. It's distributed all over the world. But I can put my crypto or my Bitcoin in that and lend it in that application and make back 5% a year, right? And I can take that money and I can go invest it in something else. So you can now go take an asset and get a loan from that asset without anyone's permission, without a credit score check, and without a bank account.
But so if you were the lender in that situation, what happens if somebody defaults on paying you back?
It's all built into the code. So if the price of Bitcoin drops or their collateralization, their principal up against it drops to a certain point, the contract is automatically liquidated and the money is separated, right? So it all happens in a computer network.
Wow.
And we now have decentralized exchanges. So a decentralized stock exchange. They're not selling actual stocks yet, but they're selling crypto assets. Right. But these are exchanges that are, again, not run or owned by a single entity. They exist now on the internet as their own entity without oversight, and it's just based on transparent code. So everybody, again, knows how it works. But you and I can put our assets into this exchange and trade it out for another asset just like we would with E-Trade. And there's no fees, there's no owner, there's no chance of your account getting shut down, there's no reason to go through an application process to open this account. And so you look at the hundreds of billions of dollars in fees that are generated by Wall Street through the traditional banking system and all of these processes that are now essentially being rewritten through DeFi without the fees, without the ownership, without the gatekeepers and the guards. And their entire industry is being dismantled as of the last 12 months.
Is Wall Street freaking out about this?
Yes, they'd have to be. And that's the big unknown question when it comes to crypto. Bitcoin and Ethereum are being integrated into the traditional finance system, both from a...
Just those two?
Well, I'll use those two as the primary examples. And Bitcoin specifically, U.S. lawmakers have now made it legal for banks to own and custody Bitcoin as of the last month.
Okay.
And we have futures markets that have been created, SEC approved institutions now. So Bitcoin specifically is, as of this year, now an asset that Wall Street has embraced and that Washington has embraced, because my belief is they realize they can't stop it, so might as well adopt it and control it, let's just say like a drug. And so I think that they will continue to do that for certain categories of assets. There is a risk that with privacy coins specifically, that those that can't be traced or tracked, there might be some laws that come out and outlaw those. But crypto is here to stay. It's going to get bigger. That's where the majority of my net worth is. And here we are at the end of 2020. I believe Bitcoin by the end of 2022, maybe 2023, will end up between $100,000 and $250,000 per Bitcoin.
Wow.
Today it's right around 10,000, 11,000. Ethereum's right around 350. I believe Ethereum's going to touch briefly $10,000 in that same time period, and go from there.
So there's so many coins, and so and let's talk about crypto, since that's kind of an area where you are. Well, let me ask this first. In a general sense, do you think that crypto is a good hedge against an inflated dollar?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bitcoin and Ethereum specifically.
Yeah. And you see that it sounds like enormous room for these things to run in the short term. Is there anything that could derail that? Is there, like, in other words, you'd say, wow, okay, we're gonna have inflation, things like this should go up in value, but people thought that about gold in the last downturn and said, hey, I called it right, I have gold, and yet the influence of the Fed, manipulating the market changes all that. Is that a risk also with crypto? It
is. It's a question I've asked myself, quite a bit, and seeing the manipulation that was had around gold. Bitcoin, it is a risk. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I think Wall Street wants their piece of the pie. I see it they believe it is a huge opportunity to make a ton of money as well. They want to see the price rise. So as of right now, I don't see that being as likely, because it is not an international monetary standard like gold is. If it gets to that point, That's quite possible.
Yeah.
So I think the hedge of that, and why I mentioned Ethereum on the other side of that, is Ethereum is not necessarily viewed as a currency, but as a mechanism, more, if you will, a commodity, almost like bandwidth, if you will, for a network. And so I don't believe that Ethereum will have this, be seen as the same type of target or the same class of asset that Bitcoin is.
So it's interesting because they're both considered crypto, but with Ethereum, it's more of a
Utility versus
yeah.
versus money.
Yeah, that's interesting, and there's always use for that. Wow. So do you think there's more risk in being in crypto, or and especially maybe let's talk about the ones you like Ethereum or Bitcoin? Is that more riskier than being in gold? More riskier than being in cash? What's the risk of cash? If you're holding on to cash and it's worth less every single day, it's not riding up. You need something to kind of balance that. So, how do you feel about the risk side of this?
It all depends on your time horizon. If you zoom out long enough, even just to 10 years, Bitcoin is the least risky asset ever in history, right? 90+% of, I guess 93, 95% of Bitcoin's entire existence has been in the green, essentially. There's only a couple of weeks during 2017 where if you bought at the top, you would be at a negative still. Other than that, no matter when you've bought Bitcoin, you've made a profit on it. So if you zoom out on a long enough time horizon, Bitcoin is extremely safe. If you're talking about days, weeks, months, Bitcoin is extremely volatile and it's highly stressful. So it is very speculative in the short term. I think less over the long term. So for me, things can change in an instant right now around the election, around politics, around COVID, around all of this stuff. So I think cash is important, but I also think the asymmetric return opportunity for crypto is something that you would be silly to miss out on, even if it's just 2, 3, 4, 5% of your portfolio. I think gold is a hedge actually against Bitcoin. I think gold is the hedge. If Bitcoin doesn't work out or something happens with that, then you have gold. The real interesting question for me that I'm looking at over the next 5 years is China is testing their digital yuan right now. So they have a digital currency that is built on blockchain technology that they are beta testing right now. And what most people don't understand is that the United States is abusing its currency like mad, let's just say since 2007, 2008, right? Anytime the helicopter shows up to drop money, we're abusing that currency and abusing the system, and we're doing it right now today at record levels. Other countries see that. They don't want to hold the dollar. They know the dollar's at the end of its lifespan. And China sees that, and we now have this blockchain tech, which allows the distribution of a new currency at the speed of light. And so what I don't think a lot of people see or understand happening is the fact that China wants the yuan to become the next reserve currency.
Right.
And what they're doing now by essentially being first to market with a nationally backed digital currency is that they're setting themselves up to acquire that by rolling that out through their primary apps, Alibaba Pay, WeChat, whatever it may be. So one day, the digital yuan is going to simply be turned on in a day and rolled out through every single one of those apps, which is used all over the world, South America, Africa, all over Asia. And so it's not like you have to open banks and issue paper currency to all of these and change people's checkings, account designations and credit card things. It will literally just be rolled out through the apps that are already installed on your phone, just like Tesla will roll out self-driving overnight while you're sleeping. And that's going to happen at some point in the next few years.
Will they eliminate the paper currency when they do it?
I believe they'll certainly phase it out and force people to go onto their digital currency, because it will be, unlike Bitcoin to an extent, but Monero and other privacy coins, it will be fully tracked. Every single transaction will be fully tracked in their currency, so there'll be zero financial privacy, which is the downside of this process.
Would they then simultaneously, do you anticipate they might simultaneously outlaw the other forms of crypto that give you privacy?
China, most likely, yes. Yeah. And that'll be used on black markets and things like that, but you're not going to be able to go buy anything with it at any kind of store and pull it out. But that's the black horse here that I don't think enough people, especially in the US, are thinking about or considering, and the fact that once that happens overnight, the world is going to be a completely different place the next day. The dollar's probably going to get dumped by China and other currencies. We don't need this trash paper anymore. And we do not have a digital dollar infrastructure in place yet.
What does it mean to dump it? I mean, they're going to just sell their, basically saying we possess a certain amount of dollars and we'll sell them to anybody who wants them and just devalue it.
The value is just going to go down and down and down, and nobody's going to want it. And we're printing trillions and trillions and trillions of it, by the month now, right? So there's going to be more of it everywhere. It's going to become confetti paper at some point, and I think that's going to be the catalyst that makes it happen.
Wow. So based on that, if let's say a scenario plays out, are there ways to buy futures of the yuan, or is it?
Not that I know of. Right now, again, this is something they're beta testing, so it hasn't been rolled out to the general population yet. There are plans for a digital dollar as well. I think we're 2, 3, 4 years behind China, so I think it's going to be too little, too late, and that's going to be an interesting day.
Well, if we summarize then, so here we are, COVID is still a thing, and no particular goal line in sight saying, this is when it ends. We just don't know. We're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. So if I heard you correctly, staying about half liquid cash, basically saying, let's do that. And some gold, some crypto. You're not in the market at all as far as equities.
I'm not in the market at all right now with equities. We are buying some real estate. We just bought a home. The real estate market here in Texas is literally off the charts. It is a very hot market right now.
Is that because people are moving out of places like California to come here? Yeah.
It's very demographic based. So Austin and Texas specifically. So real estate is an interesting place to be right now if you own a home, and it is an interesting hedge if you have a loan, which you want a long 30-year fixed loan, because that is something that you can take advantage of as the dollar is devalued, right? The amount of the loan stays the same, the amount of the currency, the value goes down, so it gets easier to pay off that loan.
Yeah, and your house, I guess proportionally goes up as far as the amount of dollars, value. Even though the value. Yeah. So, and it's interesting because the dollars aren't just valued, but at least the property requires more dollars to buy it, so you're kind of like moving up with it. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. So real estate, I'm seeing there are hotbeds of it. I mean, where I am in Park City, I mean, it's like I don't even recognize my town anymore. It's gotten so flooded with people, and everything's being bought within. It's on the market for a day and it's gone, and I never saw that before in all the time I've lived there. So real estate might make sense, I guess, but it's sort of focal. It's not like a generalized thing.
Correct. Definitely depends on the market that you're in, and I certainly want to be on the East or West Coast and dealing in real estate right now. But I think being very, very conservative and very cautious right now is the plan, and there will be opportunities that present themselves, and just having the ability to take advantage of those opportunities. Is the market going to drop and crash again? I have no idea. I hope so. If it does, I'll buy some stock.
Right.
Right now, I'm not.
It's interesting. Another question, because you mentioned war earlier, is something that's predicted. Who knows? But what do you think happens to crypto if a war breaks out?
Yeah, that's interesting. It depends on the extent of the war. If it is a full-on global war against the U.S. and China, nothing's going to matter.
Yeah.
It's food and shelter and self-protection. If a full-on war were to break out, that would likely include the destruction of the electrical grid, whether it's from an EMP or intentionally or unintentionally. So at that point, the banking system down, the electric grid's down, nothing matters, right?
Nothing matters,
and
right.
so I'm not super concerned about war because there's nothing we can do about it. And if it happens, it's kind of over for everybody anyway. With that being said, actually, that brings up a really great point. A lot of people talk about the importance of having life insurance, as a part of your financial plan. But that's life insurance in the traditional sense, in case it pays you cash when you die, which I think is incorrectly named. It should be called death insurance, basically.
Right.
I think it would be very prudent for people to have actual life insurance, which is to take a portion of your funds and buy some food, and buy some bullets, and buy some supplies, and buy some very basic things that you need for your family to actually survive and stay alive in very, very uncertain times. which I think this is. I can't, again, if you go back and read that book, this is not just my opinion. This is interesting times, and I think it's going to get more interesting, unfortunately, and then I don't mean that in a positive light. So if you don't have those things on hand, hopefully COVID woke you up to the fact that it might be a good idea to go get those items, because we can probably all remember the empty store shelves, just 9 months ago, and what that was like. So that to me would be a very foundational piece of a portfolio, frankly. A financial portfolio is having the physical security you need today.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I love how you speak with equanimity when you're talking about your potential disaster, which is sort of reassuring. I mean, it's you're just kind of saying these things could be on the horizon, and here's some things to think about. But it's real. I mean, there's no doubt in my lifetime that I've never felt quite this way about confluence of circumstances, how they're kind of showing up. So I think it's kind of, I'm listening to what you're saying as far as what to do with money, what to do not just with money, but having resources. And if you're in that position, you should be sleeping about as good as you can at night, given these circumstances. So I appreciate you sharing all that.
Yeah, I think, when you and I talked a few months ago, the primary message for everybody, which I think remains the same, is that your own worst enemy is your personal bias right now and how you view the world.
Yeah.
Because most people view the world through their past experiences or opinions or the media that they watch, and that determines the decisions that they make. And that is the biggest danger, is that you're only seeing the world in one way, when in fact the train is coming from this side and you're looking over here. Mm-hmm. And so if you can plan for either outcome taking place, then you're really good to go. So I think sitting down and being very aware of, hey, where am I overweighted? Where am I underweighted? What do I think is going to happen? Well, what if that doesn't happen? And then planning accordingly. I think that will provide the best possible outcome for somebody.
Yeah, you make a great point about confirmation bias, and I see it as and when you're in a safe place and trying to create a positive and more beautiful future, then that's great. You have this. It's like what every entrepreneur's got to have confirmation bias, because the odds are against them. They believe they can do something that if you really look at it rationally, is probably not a good idea. But you go for it because you have a vision, right, of a more positive world. But when there's threat, confirmation bias could really be an enemy.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's really an interesting distinction that you bring to the table. So I appreciate you sharing that, and I also appreciate your generosity with your time. When we ask you to come and sit and have a conversation with us, you always say yes. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's always my pleasure.
One thing I know that is happening when I hear from Mike Dillard is that I'm getting the truth as he knows it. I've learned a lot from him over the years, and I just learned a lot from him from that interview, and it was something that I couldn't wait to share with you. After the interview was over, I was like, I can't wait to get this in front of you so you could see it too. So thanks for tuning in. I don't know about you, but I find that very often people cite their circumstances as to why they cannot become successful, why they cannot overcome obstacles, why other people had better advantages than they did, so they play small because they feel like that's been their fate. I hate to tell you, but you're about to lose all excuses right now. I interviewed JT McCormick. JT has an unbelievable story. Chances are, and I can't say 100%, but chances are, the circumstances he grew up in were a lot tougher than yours. Your eyes are going to pop open when you hear his story, and then you'll see what he's made of his life. He is somebody that shares the story, talks about how he overcame challenges, and has phenomenal ideas on how to create wealth and entrepreneurial success. You're going to love this interview with JT McCormick. JT, thanks so much for sitting down with us.
Patrick, this is going to be fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I have watched your story. I've seen you tell your story. So now I'm really excited to be face to face with you to kind of talk about this and to share your wisdom. So let's go back. Tell us about your childhood and kind of how things started out in life for you.
Oh, Patrick, come on. That's an open-ended question. I mean, where do I start? So my father was a black pimp in the 1970s.
I mean, literal pimp.
Literally, yeah. It's not like today where somewhere in our society we turn the word pimp into a positive. Pimp my ride, pimp my house.
Yeah, right.
No, my father was a real pimp. He put women on a street corner. They sold their bodies. He collected their money. He was a 1970s pimp and drug dealer. He was a black man. Wow. And my mother is a white woman, and she was raised in a 1950s institutional orphanage.
Wow.
My last name, McCormick, we have no clue where it comes from. My mother was given that name in the orphanage, and to this day, we don't know where or why where that name originated from. So those are my origins of where I started. My father has 23 confirmed children. We joke and say confirmed because God only knows how many more are out there. Wow. The most he had by one woman was 3. So I kind of let you know how much he got around.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean...
And what part of the country were you in?
Dayton, Ohio.
Dayton, Ohio.
That godforsaken place. But
Yeah.
For me, not a lot of positive memories outside of Dayton. But, yeah, that's where I started and give you the cliff notes. I've been sexually molested by my father's prostitutes when I was a kid. I was in and out of juvenile 3 different times. Left with my half brothers and sisters for 3 weeks when I was 12 years old. Their heroin addict mother left us.
When you say left, what do you mean?
Left, took off, said she was going to go get a pack of cigarettes on a Sunday afternoon, and did not come back for 3 weeks. And I was 12, and my half brothers and sisters were 4, 3, and 2. And so about 5 days into this, we realized we don't have any more food. So I had the 4-year-old watch the other 2, and I went down to the store. This is February in Ohio, so cold, snow. Wow. I'm supposed to be in school. And I go down to the store, I steal food, come back so we can eat. And about 7 days into it, we don't have any more diapers. So I had to potty train my 2-year-old brother, and I sat him on the toilet. And he's crying, I'm crying, and I said, hey, this is how it's got to go down. Until something comes out, you're not getting up. And that's how I potty trained him. And 3 weeks went by, but I'll be damned if I was going to leave them. Someone asked me the question recently. They said, when was I first in leadership? Mm-hmm. And that was the moment for me, because I had to make a decision. Do I leave my half brothers and sisters and go to school? Or do I man up at 12 years old, be a leader, and take care of them? So I refused to leave them.
And that was interesting. So you had this sense of responsibility, but at the same time, the adult role models, didn't take any responsibility for you or the kids.
No.
So it's interesting that you felt like you had to step up and be a leader and take responsibility there.
I don't know exactly where it comes from. Mm-hmm. It was just something that they were my half brothers and sisters, and I wasn't going to leave them.
Right. So what finally happened? You're left for 3 weeks. Somebody came back. I mean,
so their mother came back. My half brothers and sisters were obviously excited to see their mother. Mm-hmm. I stood back and I just kind of waited, and then when everything calmed down, I stepped up to her. I'm all of 12 years old. And I say, where the F have you been? Mm-hmm. This woman punched me so hard, my ears started bleeding. She started kicking me, beating me, and so I ran away. Well, I got brought back, and the beating the second time was worse than the first one. Wow. So the next day, one of my uncles, my father's brothers, picked me up and took me out to another one of my dad's girlfriend's houses. Mm-hmm. And I thought everything was going to be okay until the weekend came around, and I realized that, oh, wow, she's an alcoholic. And so she started beating me, and I just got tired of getting beat. So I fought back, and she called the police, and I went to juvenile. And I was in juvenile for 2.5 months. My mother was in Texas.
She beats you.
She beat me.
But you go to juvenile.
I go to juvenile because I fought back. She called the police. She was the adult. And so the police came, picked me up. My father was in England. My mother was in Texas, but did not know I was back in Ohio. She had no clue where I was. Whole different story.
Yeah.
But I was in juvenile for 2.5, almost 3 months. No one knew I was there.
Wow.
So I just stuck.
Wow.
Yeah.
So where'd it go from there?
Once I got out, one of my aunts picked me up. My real name's Javon, and so one of the correctional officers at the time, Javon wasn't a common name. So she said, "Hey, do you have an aunt named Jean?" I said, "Yes." And I got really excited. And so my Aunt Jean ended up picking me up. She took me to one of my other aunt's houses to stay. And late at night, I heard my aunt and my uncle talking. They weren't arguing, but they said, "We can't afford to feed them." So in the middle of the night, I pack up my little suitcase and I leave. I go sleep on a bus stop. And so
How
I
old
was
were you?
homeless. I was 13.
Wow.
And so I was homeless, but every day I knew I could go get a meal at school. So I'd take my little suitcase with me full of things, and I'd walk to school. I'd show up, and I was in middle school. Kids are relentless at that age. So I would get teased, and I got tired of being teased. I got in a fight, beat a little boy up. Little boy went into a coma. I go back to juvenile.
Wow.
And so that kind of went on. Like I said, I was in there 3 different times. And so at the age of 15, I finally got reunited with my mother in Texas. And I'll make the story short there. When they went to enroll me in high school, my mother, I'm in the counselor's office, and she says, "Okay, you're a sophomore in high school. You should be in geometry." Unknown to anyone, that was the first time I'd ever heard the word geometry. And so I had no clue what I was going into, but I was going to try. So I go in there, 6 weeks pass, everyone pretty much figures out, okay, this kid's not too bright. And so they test me, and I'm testing on a 5th or 6th grade level at the age of 15.
Wow.
Graduation rolls around. Obviously, I don't have enough credits. I ended up having to go to summer school. I never graduated or walked the stage. Had to go to summer school to take remedial classes. Got my high school diploma. My high school diploma was given to me by a janitor. And
How does that work?
So when I finished my remedial classes, I went. They said, "Okay, you can go back up to your school and get your diploma." So I go, and I'm thinking to myself, "Oh wow, there's going to be this celebration. There's going to be confetti. There's 2 cars in the parking lot." And I walk in. There's a secretary and the janitor. And I say, "I'm here to pick up my high school diploma." He walks over to the lady. She nods, and he goes to the safe and pulls out the piece of paper. Comes over to me, hands it to me, and that was it.
Wow.
No confetti, no streamers. I get home, and my mother tells me, "Great, you got 2 weeks to find a job." Damn, yeah, no confetti, high school diploma, that was it. So,
Wow. And then what was your first job?
cleaning toilets.
Oh.
I was cleaning toilets, and I was a busboy. And my mother and I would always make the joke when we were growing up. I was with my mother the first 9 years of my life. We were poor, we owned welfare, the whole 9. And we would always joke that we were so poor we couldn't afford the O and the R. We were just po.
Right.
And so the damnedest thing, my first job was at a place called Po Folks.
Oh, come on.
I cannot make this up. It was at a
Come on.
restaurant called Po Folks, and I cleaned the toilets, and I was a busboy from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. each day. And that was my first job.
Wow. So you're gonna have to finish the track now. So that's your first job.
Yeah.
How do you where does it go from there?
So my mother was working at an insurance company, Nationwide Insurance, and she got me a job in the mailroom. And I went and applied and so I walked around with this cart, delivered mail, and my first job, I remember my salary was $10,000 a year. And so that was my first job, and I really got to experience corporate America. And I got to see how people shook hands, how they interacted with one another. And I was just a sponge. I paid attention to all my surroundings. Anytime I could see an executive, I would do my best to try to follow them for a little bit just to hear how they spoke, what they did, how they said it. And so I was there 4 years. And to make a little extra money, I also personal trained on the side, working out. And one of my clients, his father owned a payday loan company. And he said to me, "Hey, you should go work for my dad." Well, at the time, I didn't know what his dad did. I knew they had a big-ass house and a bunch of cars. So I said to him, I'm like, "Man, your dad could be a drug dealer. I don't know," just because that was the world I was from.
Right.
And he goes, "No." He goes, "My dad started with one payday loan company, and now he had over 400 of them." And what intrigued me when I interviewed with his dad was his dad only had a high school diploma. So that really spoke to me. I'm like, okay, well, if he did this, maybe I can do it.
Right.
And so I worked with him in the proofing department, where you sat back in this room and you looked at reports and deposit slips and you made sure all the money matched. It was so tedious. I hated it.
Right.
60, 90 days in, I asked the manager, I said, okay, how many reports have been proofed in a day? And she goes like 42. I said, okay. So driving home that day, I said, all right, tomorrow I'm going in, I'm going to smash the record. And I did like 72 the next day.
Wow.
And then 73. And then a month afterwards, the owner calls me up to the front. And real country guy, Texan, he goes, "Hail, Jovan." Now, my name's Jovan, not Jovan. And he goes, "Hail, Jovan, what is it you want to do, son?" And I'm sitting in his office, and he had this picture behind him of him and the executive vice presidents. I've never been afraid to ask for what I want, because the worst thing you can say is no.
Right.
Maybe F no, but still no.
Right.
And for me, no just means not right now.
Right.
And so he asked me, "What do you want?" I said, "I want to be in the picture." And he goes, "Hell, son, you got balls, don't you?" You asked me what I wanted. And he said, "Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you out to different offices, and you can learn how the offices work and do a little cleanup on offices that aren't functioning well." Did that for about 9 months. Calls me back into his office 9 months later. He said, "Hell, here's what I'm going to do for you, son. You're going to be a regional vice president of Louisiana, Vegas, or Portland, Oregon. You get to pick." Well, I'd spent time in Louisiana, and no disrespect to anybody, but good God, did not want to go there. Vegas, in my opinion, worse than Louisiana, and so I had never been to Portland, Oregon. So he sends me up there to go see if I like it. I get off the plane, I see the trees. This is January,
Yeah.
so it's not the nicest time of the year. I get off the plane, I see the trees, I see the air, smell the air. Oh, that's it. I'm in. I'd never even left the airport. I go, I'm in. This is where I want to go. I'd never seen anything like that. So ended up moving to Portland, Oregon, and that's at 23 years old. He gave me an opportunity to be a regional vice president. And let me back up. He didn't give me an opportunity. I created an opportunity. And so worked there. 30 days into it, Patrick, he calls me up and he goes, "Hell, Jovan, I want you to go down to Eugene, Oregon, and open an office." And my response was, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Need anything from me?" "No, sir." Hung up the phone. I sat there and I go, I have no clue how to open an office. I'm 23 years old. So I just said to myself, okay, step one, where the hell's Eugene, Oregon? Step two, drive to Eugene, Oregon. Right. Step three, I got there, need a realtor, need to find a place. And then it hit me, wait a minute, I got 3 offices in Portland, Oregon. I'll just duplicate those and make this look like that. And that's what I did. So 3 years later, I ended up with 6 offices, 8 total. 3 of them I opened. 2 of them were the purchase of a competitor that we bought out. And so incredible opportunity for me. And what made me leave, one day, I'm mixed race, half white, half black. A white lady comes into one of the offices, and she's paying on her $100 loan. Now, you and I both know, if you've got to borrow $100,
Right.
you're in a pretty strapped position.
Yeah.
And so she was coming in to pay on her $100 loan. It was like $21 to make her payment, but she had a mixed race little boy with her. And all I saw was me and my mom. And the next day I resigned. I couldn't do it because it was an incredible opportunity. To this day, I thank him. He was so instrumental in my career in allowing me to have that opportunity. But it's a vicious cycle that so many people are just stuck in and they can't get out. I mean, we had people who had loans at all 6 offices.
Oh, wow.
And they're just stuck. They're using one to pay for the other, and I just want it out. And I don't knock it. You know, it's legal. Make your money. Do your thing. But I just want it out.
So you left that job,
Yeah.
and you said you'd, you thanked them, et cetera, but you just couldn't do it
Couldn't do
anymore. Okay. So where did you go from there?
Moved back to San Antonio, Texas, and had saved quite a bit of my money. And so, because you know, when you don't have money and then you finally get some, you do one or two things: you hoard it or you spend it all.
Right.
So I became a bit of a hoarder, but I started self-teaching myself how to invest in the stock market. I was always intrigued by the stock market, it's the damnedest thing. You don't have to invent anything. I don't have to create anything. It's I can invest $100 and turn it into 1,000, 1,000 to 10, and I don't invent anything. To this day, I'm still waiting for somebody to come ask me for all this money back that I've been able to make. But I moved back to San Antonio, Texas, and I thought, okay, what's next? And so I'm 46. I'm old. And so I'm in the...
Now you were, how old were you? You were in your 20s then.
Yeah, I was in my 20s then. Now I'm 46. So take you back then. I got the classifieds where you actually used to look in the paper for a job.
Right.
And so there was a lady that was hiring for a mortgage processor. I thought, okay, sounds kind of cool. I don't know the mortgage industry. So I applied,
Right.
went in, interviewed with her. She saw my resume from what I had just done, and she said, why would you want this job? I said, well, I don't know the industry. I'm willing to learn. I'll do everything I can to learn. So she hired me, went in, learned every facet of mortgage, went from a loan processor to a mortgage officer to ended up working for Countrywide Home Loans. We all know how that party ended up. But I was really intrigued with the founder of Countrywide Home Loans, Angelo Mazzello, and the reason is, and I'm still a fan. I know there's many people in this country who hate him, but damn it, I'm going to say it. I am a fan, and when I read that he started Countrywide Home Loans, which at one time was the world's largest home lender, he started it in California on a card table on the courthouse steps. I thought, okay.
Yeah.
He was a hustler.
Right.
And so I was just intrigued by that. And so I got the opportunity to meet him and like 2 years ago. And it was great. I got a picture with him.
That's
And
great.
so, but anyway, learned the mortgage industry, made a ton of money. We all know what happened with the mortgage industry. I ended up making $1 million at one point through investing and working. I went broke. I did exactly what I said. Lottery winner. Spent it all. Went broke, so broke I had to borrow money from my stepdad and my best friend to pay my rent. I remember going to the gas station at night with a handful of $10 in quarters and saying, can I have $10 on number 7 to get gas, because I was embarrassed. I had to get money out of my change box, and so I was broke. I had no money, and went from the mortgage industry, one Countrywide, to Wachovia, another one, we know what happened there. And then from Wachovia, I started working for a company called Insperity. And Insperity was, they sell healthcare benefits, payroll, workers' comp, and I sold the service to a gentleman who owned a software company. And 30 days after I closed him, took me 17 months to close him, by the way, as well. So I was relentless on my follow-up. So I closed him, and 30 days later, he calls me up and he says, hey, how would you like to come work for me? And I was like 38 at the time, and he said, I go, man, that's software. That's a young man's game. I know nothing about that. He goes, but you know how to sell, and you're great at follow-up. And he said they never had a sales team. So I said, count me in. I'll come do it. So I was the lowest paid person, and we used to make our calls in the storage closet, and that's where we used to make our sales calls.
Boiler room.
Yeah, exactly. So I knew nothing about enterprise software. I would call competitors and have them pitch me to learn the field, but I knew, okay, I'll just keep calling everybody.
That's interesting. That's fascinating. I never heard anybody else do that. So how would you learn how people in this industry pitch?
Yeah.
And you would call competitors as if you were a prospective customer.
Yes.
And get the pitch and say,
get the pitch.
okay, I see what they're doing.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's exactly what I
That's
would do.
doing homework, yeah.
Well, and I was very fortunate that I was employee number 13, so there were about 9 software engineers there. I was very fortunate that I could walk out of the storage closet and say, hey, do we do this? And, you know, based on whatever question someone asked me when I was prospecting. And people would say, yes, we do that. No, we don't. And I go, well, I know we don't, but I just sold it. So what are we going to do? And so they were phenomenal team, smart people. And my goal was, okay, let me get in, let me sell. And it was a phenomenal opportunity that my attitude was, okay, there's the Fortune 1000, and I'm going to call all of them. And my attitude was, and so many people ask me this in sales, JT, why does no not bother you? If I'm prospecting the Fortune 1000 and I call you up and you say no, I got 999 other people I can go call. Someone's going to say yes. And my mentality is this as well. When I was a kid and I would come home from school and I'd ask my mother, are we going to eat dinner? She would say no. That hurts because there was nothing I can do. You saying no, you won't do business with me? Whatever, I'll call someone else. I would just keep calling. And so, long story short, with the software company, I was the lowest paid person, employee number 13, and we ended up scaling the company. 2.5 years later, I became the president of the company. We scaled the company from one office, storage closet in Austin, to having offices in Houston, Dallas, and Monterrey, Mexico. And we ended up with over 100 people. And so, but yeah, and I don't write code.
So yeah, from the sales side, you just grew, and then you took over as president of the company.
Yeah. So I went from the sales guy to EVP of sales and marketing to president of the company.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And then how long were you there?
I was there 5 years. 5 years. And it's interesting. I'll share this with you, Patrick. So many people are intrigued with the story, and they celebrate me going from the storage closet to president.
Right.
But many people in our country don't want to hear what it took for me to do that. People don't want to hear about the sacrifice. No one wants to talk about how in a 5-year time period, I only took 11 days vacation. Now, you and I both know we live in a society now where people take 11 days vacation in the first quarter of the year.
Right.
They don't want to hear about that. There are pictures of me in the delivery room with my wife for my firstborn. You can see my laptop open in the pictures. And people don't want to hear about that because that doesn't fall with work-life balance. My attitude is, if you want to be successful, success falls, and it's funny, they both start with S, success and sacrifice. You're going to have to do it. So many people don't want to hear about that aspect of it, but that's what happened. Phenomenal opportunity, worked hard, and there you have it.
And what happened with exiting? I mean, so 5 years later, you ended up, you're president, you exit, what happened?
So I was president, was sole owner, CEO, Dustin, great guy. Still enjoyed working with him in the team there. But again, I don't write code. Wasn't passionate about it. And Q3 of 2015, I was on a flight, and I don't like to fly, and I hit a lot of turbulence, and I had 2 children at the time, and I said, oh my God, if something happened to me, my children would not know where I came from. They wouldn't know that we don't know where our last name comes from. So I set out on this mission to put my story in a book for my children. Never wanted that book to go public because of the horrific stories that were in there. And truth be told, I didn't want people to know my background. I didn't want you to know my father was a drug dealer. I didn't want you to know I didn't have a degree. There's many people out there who assumed I had an MBA. No, if you assumed it, I just ran with it. And so I was whatever I needed to be to get to wherever I wanted to go. So I set out on this mission, met the 2 guys from Book in a Box, Tucker Max and Zach Obrant. And Tucker comes over to my office. We sit down. I said, look, man, I don't even know if this is a book. I don't care if I ever sell a copy. And here's my story. And he looks at me at the end. He goes, yeah, you got a book. So long story short, we're wrapping up, and we're sitting in this conference room. It was like a 35, 50 person conference table. And he's like, man, you've built a great company here. I go, no, I did not build this. This was a combination of a lot of hard work by many people. I just got to be a part of it. And he goes, when you go through our process, will you give me feedback? Yeah, why not? Unbeknown to him, I was already looking to transition out of the software company. So I get my first email from Tucker's company, and I call him up and I say, hey, you still want feedback? And he goes, yeah. I said, I swing hard. He goes, give it to me. I go, okay, this is great. This is great. Keep doing this. This sucks. What are you thinking? Stop this immediately. And he goes, you got all that from an email? Yeah. Would you like to be on our advisory board? one thing led to another. I started doing my book with them, woke up one day as CEO of the company.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's where you are now.
That's where I am now. So here we are. I've been with Tucker and Zach now 2.5 years later. One of the things that I've greatly appreciated from them both is not only did they make me president and CEO, but they also gave me equity in the company. And that's something I never had at the software company.
Wow. So now there's so much here that's rich in the story. Let's get into the lessons.
All right.
Now we got the people who want to learn from your experience.
Right.
It seems like everything you threw yourself into, from cleaning the toilets to learning about mortgages, et cetera, that you just went out and learned everything you could.
Yes.
So you dispelled the myth, I think, through your story that you have to have an academic background in a given area to be able to succeed at it. Because I think there's a lot of people right now who are working in jobs they don't like, or that they feel compressed. Maybe they want to start to set up some side hustle to start to generate some income and have a dream of moving out and doing something else. What would you recommend to them? What's their path?
Learn everything. One of the greatest things for me, a third grade teacher, Miss Dudek, I remember she stood in front of the class one day and she said, "There are no stupid or dumb questions." I took that literally, and to this day, I'll ask for anything and everything, because the worst thing you can say to me is no. So I'll ask questions, and it's the damnedest thing. You'd be surprised that if you ask someone, people will take the time to explain things to you. Or you'd be surprised what you can ask for that people will actually give to you. But for me, it's exactly what you said. I remember when I was standing there cleaning the toilets one morning, and I looked at the toilet, and it was filthy. It was from the night before. I said, okay, if this is my job right now, no matter what I do in this world, I'm going to be the best at it. So these are going to be the cleanest toilets in San Antonio, Texas. And that was my goal. That was my mission. And so everything I approach with that same thought process. How can I be the best at this? And I want to learn, I want to ask questions, and I want to be the best at whatever it is I'm doing.
What's the role of attitude? I mean, what's interesting is, I'm sure there could be many different types of responses to your story. Somebody who's hearing the story,
Right.
Because it's a very tragic story as far as what your upbringing was, how you're being beaten by prostitutes, you're left with young children for extended periods of time. I mean, you get into that story. But you're saying it with this twinkle in your eye, a little bit of a smile on your face. So you make it kind of like. Almost like you're like, I'm not feeling like, oh my God, I'm feeling really horrible for you.
Right. No, I don't do that.
And we're laughing a little bit
Right.
about the story, you
Yeah.
know. So how does that attitude emerge? That because you could be really angry, you could be really, you could be a lot of different things. Instead, you're sitting here with a smile on your face, telling a story, and even as you're reflecting back on it, it's like so horrible that you have to laugh, kind of a thing, right?
When that last piece there, when we were poor, my mother and I, at times, all we had was laughter.
Right.
And I would be lying if I didn't tell you that in my 20s and things that I wasn't angry at times. There's been some struggles. I was horrific in relationships. I mean, a monster. I was a walking monster. Couldn't hold a relationship, didn't know how to have a relationship. And so that was a tough time period for me. There was times where I was angry. I'll share this one piece with you. I was about 33 years old, and my mother and I were having a conversation. And I remember as a kid, my dad would call and say, "Hey, get him ready. I'm going to come pick him up." And man, I'd stand in that window for hours waiting for that man, loyal. I'm like, oh, he's going to come. And you look, oh, there he is. No, that's not him. That's not him. 4, 5, 6 hours, he'd never show up. When I would wake up, there would be a Hot Wheel, a little book, some little trinket there for me. And my mom would say, man, I'm doing my best not to tear up. My mom would say that your dad stopped by. And I'd go outside with all these other kids and show them, hey, look what my dad got me, blah, blah, blah. At 33 years old, my mom told me, she said that it wasn't your dad that did that, it was me. I was furious because I had given this love to someone who really wasn't there versus the person I felt should have got the love.
Right.
So I was angry. My mother and I didn't talk for about 3 months. And furious. So I've gone through some anger, some frustration, bad relationships. But where I am now and where I've been probably over the last 10 years is I live by a formula, especially when I was broke. When I had money, then you go back to negative zero. Mindset, choices, and hard work equals success. And what I mean by that is every morning I get up at 4 a.m. I'm human. There's days I want to stay in bed, I want to hit snooze, especially if my wife's snoring. I want to stay there. But then I say to myself, okay, there's someone out there right now with cancer in a hospital that's never going to leave that hospital.
Right.
They would give anything just to walk to the restroom on their own. Forget about leaving the hospital, just to walk to the restroom. Right. And I have the ultimate gift and privilege to be able to get out of bed and go achieve my dreams and goals. So I jump out of bed and I go for it. And then choices, it really comes down to what do you want to do? And I, as simple as this. Many people won't admit this. I love McDonald's. I'll own it. Yeah. On the way to the gym, I got to pass McDonald's. Yeah. Here's the choice. Do you go to the gym? Do you stop at McDonald's? It's that simple in life. So mindset, choices, hard work. Well, for me, that's easy. Patrick, you work 24, I'm going 25. Yeah, you do 36, I'm going 37. Yeah. And then equals success. And a lot of people push back and, oh, well, JT, it's not that easy. In my opinion, it is. Yeah. And opportunity is everywhere. A lot of people don't know this. In-N-Out Burger has managers who make $160,000 a year that started cleaning the toilets. We live in a society now, not everyone, but so many people don't want to work for it. So many people want that instant gratification. No one wants to put in the time, the effort, the grind, the hustle, the extra hours to achieve their goals. You know, so many people are victims. You know, I can't change what happened to me. It's in the past. So to answer your question, all of those things, as traumatic as they were, as bad as they were, I can't change the past. No matter how much I sit here and think about it, no matter how much I sit here and dwell on it, and I can be angry, I can be mad, I can't change it. So my attitude is, I can change the next hour. I can change the next day. So I'm gonna focus on those things because I can't do anything about that.
So yeah, because the choice, I guess, it sounds like either you could be a victim of your past and a victim of your circumstances, or you can create a future.
Yes.
And so it's literally, because you talked about it as, you know, choices, mindset choices, right? So it's as simple and probably as hard as making that choice.
Yes. Make the choice. Yeah. I choose not to be a victim. I choose not to dwell on the past. I have the mindset that I can go out and learn almost anything. I mentioned this to you before. I'm fortunate that my adult career, when the internet came on the scene, and everything that you ever want to know is on the internet. Right. And so for me, that's helped me immensely in trading stocks. You know, I would say 65% of my net worth in life has come from trading stocks. And it was all just self-taught from, I'm still blown away that you can study a publicly traded company and they have their quarterly earnings on there, or you can listen to the earnings call, you can study their annual report, all these things. I'm like, okay, this is like legalized drug dealing.
So when you're trading, and are you doing like more long-term investing, or are you trading short-term?
I'm not a day trader. I have a rule for me personally, and again, no one ever taught me the rules. So there's been times, Patrick, where I've had 90% of my net worth in one trade. No one ever said that you're not supposed to do that. So I have a rule that if I make a trade, I have to be willing to hold it for at least 12 months. Now, I may exit early if I hit the numbers and what I want to make out of the trade, but I have a rule that a lot of times I get to the party early. And what I mean by that is if I foresee something that's going to happen, it may take 12 months for that to happen. So My rule is, if you're going to get into the trade, you have to stay in it at least 12 months.
So now let's say that somebody who's worked a lot of years, I've accumulated some money. I don't see retirement really as an option because I'll start burning through that capital, and I don't know how long I'm going to live, and I want to leave some for my kids, etc. So do you feel like the stock market is a place to be able to take that money and have it grow? In other words, do you feel like you have this unique and special gift? Do you feel like you just put the time in to really learn how to do this?
There's zero. I struggle to say this. I don't believe there's anything special about what I do, especially given where I come from. Now, I've got those around me, Tucker, Zach, our tribe of people who continuously tell me, like, JT, no, there's kind of something special about you. And I struggle just because of my background. But I will say most of what I know and what I've done has just been a commitment to putting in the time and effort. Even now, I love golf, but I haven't played in 2.5 years because I've got little ones. And so you have to make a decision. 4.5, 5 hours on the golf course, time with family. And so my life comes down to God, health, family, investing, and the business. And those are the things that I focus on. So much so that I disconnected from our DirecTV. I took ESPN off. I love college football. I love NFL, but it's not progressing me to where I want to go. So I don't have it on the TV. And answering your question in a long-winded fashion, but I believe people can accomplish what they want to, but you have to put in the time and effort. You know, this didn't just happen for me overnight. You know, I've been doing this for years and studying. I went 5 years one time where I didn't even buy a new pair of underwear. No t-shirts, no socks, nothing. I bought nothing new. Every dime, and I mean every dime, I would put into trading. And so for me, I do believe that anyone can learn what I do. There's nothing special about it. You need to put in the time, you need to put in the effort, and be willing to sacrifice. Unfortunately, you know this, we live in a country where people don't want to sacrifice.
Yeah, and that's what I keep hearing is that you're willing to, severe discipline, and like you said, it's choices.
Yeah.
Do I want to watch NFL football, or do I want to go make more money?
Exactly.
And sometimes I think you're exactly right. You know, people feel like, well, no, I don't want to give up these other things to go, create more wealth for myself.
Right.
And the consequence of which is then they stay in mediocrity or in a place that they don't feel fulfilled in.
But here's the damnedest thing. Then they have the audacity to complain.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm blown away by that.
Yeah.
Think of this. This is how bad some of the pieces of our society are. And I've gone on this rant before. People will stand in line overnight, 24 hours, for the new iPhone.
Right.
That does 2 new things that the phone you already have does.
Right.
We as a society had the audacity to celebrate and have cameras on site for the first person that walks out with a new iPhone. When's the last time you've heard anybody all night study their financial future?
Right.
When's the last time you hear this one? Blown away by this. Binge watching. It's become a term.
Yeah.
What'd you do this weekend? Oh, Friday night we started watching Game of Thrones season 1 and we went through season 38 by Sunday, never left, ordered pizza, didn't move the cat. When's the last time someone said they binge studied their financial future? Never. But like you said, then people want to complain.
And they want it to magically appear.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so how come I'm not making out? But it's like because you've been watching Game of Thrones.
Right.
Yeah.
So while you're binge watching Game of Thrones, I'm sitting there studying some company's quarterly earnings, their annual report, trying to figure out, okay, why is this stock doing this? Okay, why did these 3 executives just leave? Oh, you filed bankruptcy, but you've got $4 billion on the books in cash. You're not really bankrupt. You're doing something else that's going on. But you're watching Game of Thrones, which does absolutely nothing for you but entertain you. Great. And if that's what
to
you
distract
want,
you from your life. Yeah.
And I'm not knocking it.
Yeah.
If you want to binge, but don't complain about what you don't have afterwards.
Right. Your current net worth, how much of that comes from your stock trading activities versus other business activities?
65% of my net worth comes from stock trading. and the rest has come from obviously salaries and bonuses and things of that nature. But the great majority of my net worth is from stock trading.
And you're trading your own money, not other.
My own money.
Yeah. Wow. So now you're up against, pros. People who literally, big banks, institutions, et cetera, because, they're studying the same stuff you're
Right.
studying. So what do you think gives you the ability to compete with those people?
I do my best not to compare myself to the guy that's got the Harvard MBA that works at Goldman Sachs. I've always been intrigued, and I always thought, man, I'd love to work at Goldman.
Yeah.
But I just do what works for me. And my philosophy is, what's the story? And you heard me mention this a minute ago. I'll give you one of my favorite trades I ever made. When American Airlines filed bankruptcy, I thought, oh man, again, I'm 46 years old. I remember Eastern Airlines, Pan Am, TWA. I remember those airlines going out of business. And then I thought, okay, here's American filing bankruptcy. And I was blown away by it. But then I saw they had $4 billion on the books. Like, nobody files bankruptcy if you have $4 billion. And come to find out, there was a multitude of reasons why. There were the pilot, the union contracts. There were the flight attendants. I didn't even know the baggage handlers had a union, and they were there as well. Stock went down to about 25 cents. And I said to myself, $4 billion, no one files bankruptcy for that. So I bought stock at 35 cents. Shortly thereafter, they got approval to buy new jets. And I was like, see, no one's filing bankruptcy here. You all are trying to do some restructuring, but you're not filing bankruptcy. You're not going out of business. And so my goal was to go from 35 cents to $1, and I was going to get out. When they got approval to buy the jets, the stock went up to a little over $1. And I said, okay, I'm going to hold this. Then word started coming out of a possible merger with them and U.S. Airways. Stock went to 3, stock went to 5. So long story short, I sold all the stock at about 13 and change.
Wow.
Yeah.
From 35 cents.
From 35 cents.
That's the one to talk about for sure.
Yeah. and so for me, I want to know what's the story. And I'll give you another one. My favorite short of all time was GoPro. I could not understand the business model. I knew it was the hotness. Everybody had a GoPro camera, but it was a one-trick wonder. All you had was a camera. Right. How often does someone need to go buy a new camera? My wife and I even went in. She hates when I do stuff like this. I went in and bought one. So I just wanted to see what was the hype. We didn't particularly care for it. Took it back. And so right around $71, I shorted the stock. And people thought I was a fool. They said, oh, you're dumb. Well, stock kept going up. Somewhere between 80 and 81, the stock took a turn and started dropping. If you go look at GoPro right now, it's sitting somewhere at like 5 and change. It's been as low as 4. And there's even talk that they've sought out Chase to find a buyer for them. And the story for me, though, was you only do one thing. Right. There's no reoccurring revenue. There's no, how often does someone need to buy a new camera? So I call it common sense. What's the story? And that's how I look at trading.
Do you think that other people can learn trading? Like, so if I'm the person that says, I'm creating salary, I can allocate some of this and I can go into the market. Is it something you'd recommend for someone who's looking for a way to expand their wealth? Or do you think that there's some unique attributes that most people don't possess?
I don't believe that there's any unique. Here's the unique attribute: the willingness to save and the willingness to sacrifice. Right. That is the unique attribute in our country right now. Most people spend everything they make. Right. If you live right now in a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2-car garage, and then you get a raise, say you're making $75,000, then you get a raise to $100,000. Almost immediately, our country has to go out now and go from the 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2-car garage. Well, hell, we got to get the 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 3-car garage. And that's the society we live in. And so no one is willing to go from $75,000 to $100,000, live the same lifestyle, and take all that extra money. even if it's in a mutual fund.
Right.
You know, here's what's real funny to me, Patrick. 401ks. You'll speak to some people and you'll say, hey, do you invest in your 401k? Every now and then you get that person that feels good and they're like, yeah, you know, put in money every month. Great, nice. What fund are you in? Oh, they don't know.
Right.
And every now and then you'll have someone that'll say, oh, I'm in a small cap, you know, whatever. Oh, nice. What are their top 10 holdings? Oh. So you have people putting money into a 401k that have no clue what the money's even going to. They don't know how long the person who's been running the fund has been running the fund. They don't know the top 10 holdings. They just know they're putting money into something. Again, let's go back. Who's been studying their 401k on the weekend?
Right.
Who's taking the time to realize, oh, I'm in this fund. Top 10 holdings are ExxonMobil, Apple, da-da-da-da-da. Oh, Patrick's been running this fund since 1997. You know, returns since inception are 13%. Fund's been around since 97, 2008. Who's doing that homework? Very few people.
So one of the most important categories of life is their financial and wealth accumulation, yet almost no attention paid to it.
Exactly.
It's kind of absurd.
So I'm probably going to piss a lot of people off when I say this, but I'm willing to. When I was in the mortgage industry, what I found amazing was when everything blew up, you had our society pissed at the banks. Goldman, all of them, Lehman, Washington Mutual, you know, they did this, they did this. Last time I checked, no one made you sign the documents. So as much as I do blame banks for their piece, I believe it's a dead set 50-50 split.
Right.
The banks were wrong for some of the things they were doing. They knew what was happening, and people were signing on to loans that they knew they had no business signing up for.
Right.
But no one talks about the personal accountability over here on this side. It's let's blame the big banks. You are ultimately buying something that for many people will be the biggest purchase they ever make, and you're not going to take the time to understand what you're signing. You're going to blame the bank for that? No.
Yeah. Interesting. It all comes down to self-responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah, doesn't it?
And to your point, you asked me, personal accountability. I am personally accountable for, am I going to be a victim or am I going to move forward? And that's where it starts for me. I can dwell and ask myself all the time, why was I born to a pimp father and an orphaned mother? Why did I go through the things that I went through? But I can ask why all day. Doesn't change anything. But man, I can go study quarterly earnings and make some cash.
So, and here's another thing I think, and it goes to mindset, that you went from, basically rags to really growing in a career, accumulating some money, and then you crashed again.
Yeah.
How was that psychological? Was that devastating to you?
You know, it sucked.
Yeah, what goes through your mind?
It wasn't devastating. And here's why. Here's something that I can't imagine. Imagine if you were born into a family of wealth and you've always had wealth, and now you're 40 years old, and for whatever reason, your wealth is wiped out, and now you don't have any. Man, I cannot imagine what goes through that person's mind. I came from being broke. I knew what being broke felt like. So I was very familiar with it. And it sucked. And yes, I had a lot of heart-to-heart conversations with myself of how could you do this? You were a lottery winner. You made all this money only to blow it all and not have any. But I knew, okay, I made it once, I can do it again. And that's my mentality. Did it once, I'll do it again. Now I'll never go back to doing that again.
You learned something.
It wasn't devastating for me. It sucked. Obviously, I didn't like it. I will say it was a huge character builder for me because what I was able to do was look at myself in the mirror and say, okay, I had all this money. Now this money's gone. What am I left with? What's my character? Who am I as a person? What do I want to be going forward? Do I just want to dwell on, I lost all this money? The money didn't define me. It was a real moment for me to realize, man, I can't even hold a relationship. I'm incredibly disrespectful to women. I've been a monster in relationships. What's the character I want to be? And that's what became the building of really, I guess, me, part 2.
If you've got some ambitious young people out there that are saying, hey, I want to go, carve out my place in the world and make it happen, anything you'd say to them? What advice would you give?
Mindset, choices, hard work equals success. And on top of that, I would say find out what is it you want to do, and just dive 100% into it. It's interesting. Some people will still email me, reach out to LinkedIn, and those who put time into the question they're asking me or what it is they're wanting, I'll actually email back, say, hey, let's schedule a 30-minute call. And because if you've put time into it, I remember being the person who was once asking the questions,
Right.
once wanting the feedback. So I would say find out what it is you want to do. Do you want to work at Goldman Sachs? Do you want to be a doctor? Do you want to run a nonprofit? There's nothing wrong with that. What is it that you want to do, and put every ounce of energy into it. And for those young people who are wanting what I call extreme success, and success isn't defined by financials.
Right.
They want to be clear on that. It's not by financials alone. For me, it was because of the way I grew up. But if you want extreme success in whatever it is you do, success comes with sacrifice. So don't walk around yelling work-life balance, because there is none if you want extreme success. Now, you may find some after you achieve a certain level of success, then you can start to dabble in a little work-life balance. But when you're on the grind, the hustle to achieve that extreme success, you need to go ahead and put work-life balance on the shelf. Be willing to sacrifice. Be willing to work a Saturday or Sunday. Be willing to work till 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And don't complain about it. Realize that's how you're going to get there.
Any final thoughts for the people out there who really want to figure out how to get financially independent and create wealth and preserve wealth and grow wealth?
I'd say similar to what we just talked about right there. If you want to understand the stock market, I'll give you a great example. A friend of mine, he goes, okay, teach me some things. So we're watching CNBC. And he goes, man, what does all that stuff under there on that chart mean? It said JJASO. And he goes, what is all that? I go, June, July, August, September. And he goes, you're kidding me. I go, no, it's not as hard as people think it is. But it's not all going to come to you at once either. You have to put in some time. I wake up, literally, the TV turns on, set to alarm, CNBC or Bloomberg. That's how I wake up. I have found an immense love in business and in investing. That's where I dedicate my time. Business, investing in my family. And so dig deep, do the research, study, and realize it's not going to happen overnight.
Well, JT, your story is incredible. It's very inspiring, and I really appreciate you sharing it with us here. And I look forward to reading your book.
My man Patrick, I appreciate it. I thank you much. Very humbled and flattered to sit here, and I'm still amazed people actually want to hear this.
Trust me, they do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Well, there's the story, right? I mean, I've got no excuses. I heard that. I've got no excuses, no ability to be a victim. If JT can do what he did, then I can go out and succeed also, and so can you. And that's why we are all here together to create better success and a brighter future. Thanks for tuning in. Many entrepreneurs and business owners that I know, that I respect, who actually are out there teaching other entrepreneurs, who do they look up to? One name keeps coming up, Verne Harnish. Verne Harnish is someone who plays on the big level and has influenced some of the most successful entrepreneurs that I know. He's sharp, he's alert, he knows what's going on right now, and his principles, as much as they can be put on the ground in today's environment, are really timeless. I've learned a ton from him, either directly and indirectly through other people, and my ability to sit down with him and have this interview was something I considered a privilege, and now I get to share that privilege with you. So enjoy this interview with Verne Harnish. Verne, I've heard about you for years from the people I respect most in the world, especially in the world of entrepreneurism. So I was really, really excited to come and have this interview, so thanks for taking the time to sit.
Well, Pat, that's so nice to say. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So let's start just with your background. Like, how did you get started in all this?
Well, I grew up around entrepreneurs. So my grandparents had their own companies. My grandmother literally, Pat, worked her fingers to the bone in putting together a upholstery business. My grandfather was early on in the television business. And so he did a television installation and repair and appliance repair in Kinsley, Kansas, of all places. And then my dad, after he left the military, they were literally rocket engineers at Martin Marietta for the Titan program, Titan missile program. And so 4 of them, as Noam Wasserman has talked about at Harvard, the best thing to do is take an intact team and leave and launch a company. Mm-hmm. So they did, a company called Higher Electronics, and it was a rocket ship. And they were actually installing television stations and security systems for the wealthy and for companies. And then the 73 recession got them. And they got one of their customers owed them about $500,000. And the SEC came in and shut him down and froze up his funds. Later on, they found he did nothing wrong. But if all of a sudden your major customer owes you $500,000 in cash flow back in the late 60s when you're really trying to scale, the guys didn't believe in bankruptcy back then, so we began selling off every asset that we had, the homes, the mountain property, the toys, and everything, trying to save the business, but ultimately couldn't.
Wow.
And Dad never recovered from that. That's when we moved from this kind of beautiful place, Colorado, out to Kinsley, Kansas. And he and I had to start over, appliance repair business. But he never recovered, became an alcoholic. Ultimately, my sisters felt the need to have him put in jail because they were worried that he was going to drink and drive and hurt somebody, and none of us wanted that on our conscience, and he never really forgave us for that, which we get as well. And a few years ago he passed away alone, and I really have been dedicated my entire life to see if I can help every entrepreneur not go through that, and every entrepreneurial family not go through what I saw him and our family have to experience through that kind of failure. So it's a very missional thing for me, Pat.
I could see that, and the experience is. I could feel in my chest as you're talking about this, because so often people talk about great success stories and these use cases about people like as this one started out, right? Group of guys go out, take the rocket ship.
Yeah.
But now there's kind of the segue from not only, the business thing, what went wrong, what can we learn, this business failed, the recession hit, maybe they didn't build their balance sheet strong enough, or something that made them vulnerable to such an event. And we could talk about that stuff, but what you spoke about is the human factor, saying, this is a person that was smart, driven, successful, that couldn't recover from something. And I'm sure there's other hazards in here that people can learn from, like saying, hey, bankruptcy maybe should be an option as compared to saying that you destroy your entire net worth, when these types of things happen, and that's a whole other conversation. But man, looking at years and decades of your own personal relationship and what had to happen as a consequence, there's a very human and maybe somewhat spiritual side to this entrepreneur thing, isn't there?
There is. And one of the things we've been really opening up and discussing more is entrepreneurs and leaders of these growth companies, they have one of the highest cohorts of depression. The pressures, I don't think a lot of people appreciate the pressures that they carry, particularly when you start getting a group of employees. And those employees are, have mortgages and car loans, and if you mess up, it's not just you, but you could be taking down a whole lot of other people. Now, with unemployment the way it is, it's a little bit less risky, but still it's quite disruptive if you're not going to continue to scale your business successfully. And it truly is, Pat, lonely at the top, and why I founded the Young Entrepreneurs Organization, which is EO today. It was a good buddy of mine, Joe Mancuso, who founded the CEO Clubs, who said early on, it's okay to be independent, but no reason to be alone. And it's interesting, right now there's a new book that's going to be coming out about loneliness. And particularly, I have to say, men in the United States suffer it deeply. And so I think if there's been any legacy of EO, it's the fact that every one of these 14,000 entrepreneurs is in a forum with 6 or 7 or 8 other entrepreneurs, so they don't feel alone. And I hate to be maybe this grotesque about it, but if they pass away, they'll at least be the pallbearers.
Right.
You know, and I asked men, all right, who would be your pallbearers? And they're like, well, I'm not sure he'd be available. He'll probably be traveling. Not sure he's that close to me.
Right.
It's this loneliness thing is real.
Yeah.
And so, and I saw my dad go through it. And so, anyway, if nothing else, I think we've left a legacy of process where these entrepreneurs are not alone that are part of EO.
Really can relate to that on a deep and personal level. As a matter of fact, the first time I heard about you was because I was in, I guess what was a forum or an accountability group with other business owners and entrepreneurs. And I met one of your friends, Rick Sapio, who couldn't stop saying enough great things about you. And so I started reading your books, learning your principles, and incidentally, so you're looking at somebody who's been greatly helped by your work who you never met. I'm another one of those. You've got a lot of those, but I'm just another one.
Thank you.
And it's so enriching for me to hear you talk about the psycho-emotional side of entrepreneurism and success. And, you could say, hey, it's kind of depressing to fail, but when you're very successful too, and you're the guy who had to make, or the gal who had to make the hard decisions, and you're kind of sitting in this place, and you're responsible for all these houses, mortgages, car payments of the people that work for you. That's another form of loneliness too. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about that. When did you form Young Entrepreneurs Organization?
Yeah, so the official start date was 1987, but the impetus, Pat, was I had this opportunity to host the first public speech of Steve Jobs after he was fired from Apple.
Wow.
And I knew his PR guy, Daniel Lewin, and several other folks, and Regis McKenna team had been consultants and coaches to me. And through all of that, after he'd been fired in '85, I'd put out this list called the ACE 100. What are the top 100 young entrepreneurs under the age of 30?
Right.
And since he was still in that leadership position in '85, when we did the event in '86, we're like, look, Steve, he literally distorted the list. A lot of people don't appreciate that at the time, 29, Bill Gates, by the way, the same age, on that list, Steve was at 1.9 billion in revenue. I mean, he really was the first true young entrepreneur. Bill was number 4 on the list at a paltry 256 million. And so a lot of folks don't appreciate, but Steve had scaled in his 20s a company 8x that of what Bill Gates had, same age, at Microsoft. And so we got him out to the Bonaventure Hotel in LA, and I'm telling you, you could hear a pin drop in that room of almost 1,200 young entrepreneurs. And I had sitting up there with Steve, young Michael Dell, and Mark Cuban, and Kevin Hannigan, and Neil Balter, California Closets, all these young hotshots in their 20s. And afterwards, I threw a party for the ACE 100 winners. And I remember being up there, and Steve literally was standing in the corner by himself. And I remember this young woman entrepreneur out of Chicago going and asking Steve out on the dance floor to dance, and he did. But I realized, wow, Joe Mancuso's right. It's okay to be independent, but no reason to be alone. And I turned to my buddy Greg Stem, who's the great treasure hunter, and I said, Greg, we have to form an organization for Steve and people like Steve. And so it was that night that the idea for the Young Entrepreneurs Organization was birthed. It took me a year, get the money raised, get everything in place, so we launched officially in 1987.
Wow, how many members now?
14,000 on the way to 28,000. We've hit our inflection point. Like we teach organizations do at their 25th anniversary.
That's so exciting. So, as I look and as I hear you reminisce about back then, and, I'm loving the creativity of how you were seeing things and what you were putting together and creating experiences for other entrepreneurs, which, is just invaluable. But when you now, because you've got, some years of experience and looking back,
multi-decades,
and you were around, for, around a lot of really influential entrepreneurs, and you're one yourself. Did things, to this point at least, is it kind of as you expected, or is this like wildly different than what you were thinking in your 20s as far as what your career would be?
Well, look, I thought I was going to be in the nuclear Navy. So I'm a mechanical engineer by training. I was particularly working in the nuclear field, and I was getting ready to be Admiral Rickover's very last class. I wouldn't have known at the time to be chosen. And then I was plucked out of that and asked to help kind of scale a Center for Entrepreneurship at my alma mater, Wichita State University, and the rest is history. So, and we like to talk about, I'm reading a great book right now called Greatness Cannot Be Planned. And, you know, we've got to set priorities on a daily, weekly basis, but you ask anyone what they're doing today, was this really their plan? It's more about serendipity and letting the love flow, and that's what happened. Wow. I never would have guessed it. Now, when I launched YEO, absolutely. It was always meant to be the YPO for entrepreneurs, and YPO already had massive scale paths. So I could see it, and that vision is being realized here, 3 decades later.
But it seems like to a large degree, your career is kind of like a magic carpet ride. It's kind of led you to places. I know you lived in Europe for a while, et cetera. So really, really interesting. So with people, the person that's watching us right now, who has such an interest in business and being an entrepreneur, what are some of the foundations that you think are the cornerstones of your philosophy around business and how to become successful in business?
Well, it's not follow your passion.
Okay.
Everyone's saying, follow your passion. And it's like 99% of the people on the planet have no idea what their passion is. And honestly, Steve Jobs did not have a passion. He didn't sit around and say, oh, I want to build the largest computer company in the world. No, what happens, and there was a great entrepreneurship professor, Ron Ronstadt, that called it the corridor principle. You just start working. You just start doing things. And all of a sudden, you bump into something that you're either really good at or starts to become successful, and then that becomes your passion.
And so it's reversing cause and effect.
It really is. Yeah. And by the way, I'd love to take credit for this, but this is Cal Newport.
Right.
I think he's one of the bright thinkers of this new generation of thought leaders. And Cal's the one who was the first to say, look, we got to take this whole passion thing off the table and instead just start working. And then when things start working out, then all of a sudden become passion. I guarantee you, if those first computers were rejected, and there were a lot of people who had launched similar things, and like Adam Osborne, that it didn't work out, I guarantee you Steve Jobs wouldn't have been passionate about it. He would have found something that he was. Now, I don't know that personally, but I haven't read anything where he was like 12 saying, oh my gosh, I would love to bring computers to the world.
Is there an integration aspect of this where once you find something that you're good at, and I think timing has a lot to do with it, right? It's like, what was the world doing when, he stumbled across computers and microelectronics and all this kind of stuff? I think there is a certain, lack of a better term, luck in timing, saying, hey, where you are, what's going on in the world, these things kind of there's a confluence. But Jobs also had a passion around art and somehow started to apply that passion to the way he was going to develop these computers. So do you see kind of an intersection of those things?
Yeah, I think it is luck. It is serendipity, which is what this book, Greatness Cannot Be Planned, really emphasizes. And you're absolutely right about market timing. We talk about in our book that there are 4 components: people, strategy, execution, and cash. And the question always is, which one of those is more important? So Bill Gross at Idea Lab said, all right, I want to look at kind of the 100 companies that we've launched and the other 100 companies that maybe he's helped fund. And he wanted to see what was the key to those who made it and those companies that didn't. And he really looked at the equivalent of kind of people, strategy, execution, cash. And I loved, Pat, that there were 2 really unique conclusions that came out of that. Number 1, all 4 matter equally. It's like a table with 4 legs. If you're missing one of them, it's just not going to be as stable. But he found a 5th that trumped them all. I even went back and re-edited my book because I had missed that. And it was market timing. The market either makes you look smart or makes you look stupid.
Right.
And it's stupid to fight the winds of the marketplace. Bill talked about how they had funded a company that should have been YouTube, but they were too early. It wasn't easy to make videos on your phones and upload them and edit them and all of that, and the bandwidth wasn't there. So the timing wasn't right. And so if nothing else, all of a sudden you find that you're good at it, which then you become passionate about. Maybe what you have to do is hold out until bell-bottom jeans come back into fashion.
All right.
And then you can ride the wave. But man, if you miss the wave, you probably ought to pivot.
You know, it's interesting as you're saying this because I'm cringing in my own experiences because I had a lot of healthcare in my background and wellness on the wellness side of it, and lifestyle wellness and longevity, that kind of stuff. So we had launched a wellness company. I mean, we got 30 patents. We really put together good technology. We were and it got traction, but we were really just for the technology and what we're trying to accomplish, we're a little bit early, and so it was a real struggle for a long time and never really got to the vision that we wanted for it. And as many entrepreneurs will say, oh, it's right, I was just early, And I have a really good friend who was a top Wall Street analyst and then became a very, very successful entrepreneur. And he looked at me and he said, well, you know what they say on Wall Street? I said, what? He said, being early and being wrong is the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really what this is, right?
Well, and on the flip side, my favorite quote of Steve's, almost of all time, Jobs, was, I'm always amazed how overnight successes take a hell of a long time.
Right.
And even though he had that early success in his 20s, it was a disaster. And it wasn't until the 25th anniversary of Apple did it really hit its inflection point.
Wow.
Starbucks was the same way. It took 20 years for them to get their first 100 stores. And it wasn't really till their 25th anniversary that they hit the inflection point. Now, we talk a lot about how come the unicorns are able to do it in about half the time.
Right.
It still takes them about a decade, and we've now learned a couple of things that they do, which we can talk about. But it takes time.
Let's talk about that. So what are some of the things they can do or accelerate to the inflection point? And I'd love to hear some of your examples of this.
Yeah. So one of the there's two things that the unicorns do that us mere mortal business leaders can adopt to accelerate our scaling. And the first is, and it's the most significant, coming back to trends, most significant trend in the history of business happened in 2007. And the financial crisis was just a result of this change. For hundreds of years, we had more demand than supply. And so really, if you could just show up, if you had the minerals and the resources, if you had what I needed, you could scale the company. And we spent, particularly the last 50 years, running around the planet trying to figure out how to do it better, faster, cheaper. Right. It was all about supply chain management. It was all about cost. But with the middle class coming on strong this century, it's over doubled in just 20 years. You would think there'd be more demand, but those people have to supply before they can consume. And so in 2007, this is Rick Cash's work at the Demand Institute, overnight, there is now more supply than there is demand in every single industry. Wow. And with the internet, being able now to do business with anyone, anywhere, at any time, in any way, we've got global competition. Look, the United States is now a net energy exporter, which is why the Middle East is, pivoting to entertainment instead of the oil industry. And so, what has to happen is all the unicorns, Pat, all the unicorns supply nothing. They're all on the demand side of the equation. You've got to, the leaders of companies now have to understand the market like they understood the cost side or supply side of the business. What does that mean very practically? You got to get your head out of the cost side and get your head into the price side. And we almost all mess up price because we're selling to people who are not logical, they're psychological. So think about it. All the unicorns, how often does price change on Amazon? How does Uber price? How do the airlines now price? It's based on a deep understanding of the demand side of the business, knowing where the customer just went. We'll get you to the concert cheap, but you're going to pay a fortune to get home kind of thing. Whereas the taxi cab companies charge in the same, cost per eighth of a mile, and that retailers has one sticker price where Amazon's changing the price almost every hour based on demand. So number one, all the unicorns got there because they understand the market and the demand and the customer side, and they don't supply anything. The second thing that all the unicorns have figured out, and I call it most brains, how to get the most free labor on the planet. So if you think about, let's go back to Amazon. How does Amazon really have value in the marketplace? Why it's now the #1 product search engine? Millions of reviews, over 500 just for my book.
Right.
And what did Amazon pay all those millions of people to review those products? Zero. If you look at Wikipedia, 300,000 volunteers on average, 8 hours a day, keeping Wikipedia up to date. What have they paid those people? Zero. If you look at Google, hey, I'm going to search for something, I need an answer. They don't have really high-paid people typing fast. Yeah, maybe building the technology, but they have 3.2 billion people that have been on the internet. They're scouring their votes and delivering up in nanoseconds what they think is the best answer. Wow. All the unicorns, Pat. Facebook, its valuation is tied to number of users, over 2 billion. What's Facebook paying all of us to keep our Facebook pages up to date, minute by minute? Zero. If you've got 2 billion free employees, you can pay your tens of thousands a lot of money. And so we're teaching us mere mortals how to get focused on the demand side as much as on the supply side, and how to begin to involve the crowd in scaling your business. Because if you can get the most brains engaged, you win.
These are really brilliant insights. I mean, I'm always studying these things, I'm reading the books, but you're putting it into context, and the light bulbs are popping in my head right now, which is really, really great. Looking at, supply and understanding, Airbnb and Uber and Lyft, what they're really doing and how they have huge valuations when they don't really own anything, right? They don't supply the room, they connect people, who have rooms, the Airbnb, for example. So I so get that. The price thing is also really, really fascinating. A friend of mine that I spent a lot of time talking to is an economist who was in one of our docuseries. His name is Paul Zane Pilzer. And Paul one time he was overtly excited. And so I'd like to talk about this, but I just want to set it up. He was overly excited. It was a scholarly economics paper. It was about 50 pages on what they called consumer elasticity, meaning that in the past, if you're the supplier, and you wanted to sell something, you sold something for $9, but the consumer really would have paid $10 for it. You left $1 on the table.
You did.
But there was no way to really know, what that consumer elasticity. You'd speculate, you'd study, and maybe test. But he said now with Uber, they can say, it's going to be 2x because of the demand, or 3x. Amazon, they have so much data flow that they can literally know the consumer elasticity in real time and then price accordingly. So I think that mastering for businesses now, mastering your pricing probably is a really important thing to do. What advice? So if I'm the entrepreneur and I've got a company and whatever scale, you can make up scales, $10 million company, let's say. And I'm a little confused about our pricing and not sure if I'm doing it right. What should I be thinking about, and how would I try to get this right?
So first, start paying attention to it and learn about it. Most entrepreneurs I talk about haven't taken a single course or read a single book on pricing. So start with...
Guilty as charged on that, incidentally.
So start with the book Confessions of a Pricing Man by Herman Simon. Herman is the guru of pricing. He runs the largest pricing consultancy in the world. Almost $300 million they'll do this year just in pricing consultancy. And he was an advisor, is an advisor to our company. Number two, and I want to share just a couple of very practical examples that might illustrate this. So the godfather of influence, Robert Cialdini, did this interesting piece of research and discovered that, let's just take a wine list at a restaurant. And most of the wine lists are ordered from least expensive wine to most expensive wine.
Correct.
All you have to do is reverse the list and put the most expensive at top to the least expensive. You didn't change a bottle, you didn't change a price, you'll drive about 26% more revenue.
Just from the order?
Just from the order, because remember, people are not logical, they're psychological. This is why we get price so wrong. Then if you anchor that wine list with 2 or 3 super expensive bottles of wine, you'll pull revenue up almost 250%. So,
250 on the same list, same inventory,
just
how you present it.
How you present it. So I am in Shanghai a few months ago where we finally launched our book in Mandarin, And one of the YPO guys there, Adrian Wall, by the way, he's got a fantastic business.
I'm sorry, which book, because you have a few?
Scaling Up.
Scaling Up, okay.
So my latest book,
Your
Scaling
latest
Up,
book.
we finally got it in Mandarin. And so Adrian Wall has got this spectacular fun business. He calls it A Taste of New York in Shanghai. So what he's done, he's gone to New York to these iconic brands, starting with Joe's Pizza. Anyone who's in New York City knows about the famous Joe's Pizza. And he arranges with each of these families to bring their brand to China. And so he was in my workshop about a year ago when I'm talking about this pricing. So let's speed up a year later. He's hosting me for this event. He said, Vern, you've got to come to one of my pizza restaurants. So he comes over and he says, Vern, you got to see what we did. Up on the big screen is his pricing list. He said, we used to list the price from least, his vegan, to his most expensive meat lovers. He said, Vern, all I did was after your workshop, reverse the list. And we didn't get the 26%, but we got almost 16% bump in revenue just by reversing the order of the pizzas from most to least instead of least to most. So it's that kind of simplicity. I'll give you a couple of business examples. So I was invited back to this executive program that I founded and still get to teach in. I got invited back to the Titans program that Rick Sapio's part of a couple of years ago. And I mentioned this pricing thing. And one of the guys says, Vern, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've got this killer software solution for the Fortune 500. And it's like only $2,500 a month, 30 grand a year, and we haven't been able to sell one. So I said, look, I'm going to go out and talk to the customers myself. And so he goes out and says, look, you guys have this huge problem. They're like, we know. And he says, and I think we've got this beautifully elegant solution. And they're like, it appears that you do. So he's like, so why aren't you buying the product? And literally the customer's like, because it's only $30,000. Do you know what it's going to cost for us to implement this? It's magnitudes more. And at 30 grand, we don't trust that you can really solve this multi-million-dollar problem that we have for that. And we're not sure you're still going to be around to support it. And then somewhere in one of those conversations, one of the guys intimated that, we got like 10x what your software cost budgeted to fix this problem. And so it didn't take him long to clue in, and he literally, Pat, 10x'd the price of his offering from 30 grand a year to 300,000. And now he can't service them as quick as they're flying off the shelves.
No kidding.
Because price, as the subtitle of this book I recommend, it says, price affects everything. And so quality is signaled often by the price.
Yes.
And that's what he learned. So in a real business-to-business situation, and we're huge fans of Victoria Medbeck, the negotiations professor at Northwestern University, if you're in a competitive bid situation, business to business, even if it's a client that you've had for years and now it's come up for rebid, you always submit 3 proposals. A good, better, best. And about a year ago in Harvard Business Review, they did a major, in-depth article about how companies are going back to the good, better, best pricing. And as a result, Dell EMC, for instance, Michael's now back public, they were able to triple the amount of after-service revenue they could generate after selling their software package by going to a good, better, best. 3 offerings then instead of 1 single price. So, look, I could spend hours, and you need to spend hours, but the psychology around pricing is something that we've got to better understand, which we can as mere mortals. And as you just said, if you can add $1 to the price, generally it goes right to the bottom line.
Right.
And if you're at a 10% profitability, you got to generate $10 more in revenue to get that same dollar to the bottom line.
I'm sitting here in stunned disbelief in the sense that everything you just said is counterintuitive and counter to what many consultants have told me. Because what do most people do? They're like, put your lowest price up first.
Right.
And so that people say, oh, I can. That's the entry point, and then try to upsell or try to add, stack more value to the other offers that bring them maybe to your higher offer. But everything you just said is the opposite of that. Basically saying, hey, start with the most expensive bottle of wine and make them work down. So it's like,
Yeah.
Wow, first of all. Then secondly, what I just heard is you've got a company that was struggling with a $30,000 price point on a product, and most people would say, well, if they're not buying it, maybe we got to try to even lower the price more, because they're saying, what's the cheapest we can get to market with to get people to want? Thinking that low price is what's attractive for most people.
Yeah.
And now they 10x their price and go from maybe they're not going to make it. And their only problem was a pricing problem.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not going to make it to now they're soaring. This is stunning information.
Yeah.
So, and you write about this in Scaling?
I do. We're really digging into this, and part of it's Pat, and I think it's one of the best book titles. And that's Marshall Goldsmith's "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," but it's real. The biggest, if we were to boil it down to one thing, the biggest constraint of entrepreneurs scaling is everything that they did to get launched will now cause them to fail. And it's this inability to be able to let go. So for instance, pricing. Most entrepreneurs got into a market by, hey, we're just going to do it cheaper and get our foot in the door, just as you described. But if you don't let go of that mentality when you hit to scale, you're not going to have the resources you need in order to fuel the business.
Wow.
In the very beginning, you said yes to whoever would talk to you, partner with you, willing to have coffee with you. Now you better be saying no 20 times more than you said yes. And in the beginning, you answered everyone's questions. Anyone who came into your office, called you up, emailed you, hey, what should we do? You needed answers when you scaled, when you started. But once you hit scale, you better be answering nobody's questions, because if you do, then all they're going to do is keep coming to ask you, and you can never get freed up as the leader in order to do the things you need to do in order to scale the business. So, and coming back again to price, the problem is once you're in the market scaling, you're going to be competing with these new entrepreneurs that want to lowball it and get in there, and that's why your pricing strategy when you go into these competitive situations is paramount in how you handle it.
Yeah, I mean, this rings so true to my personal experiences. I had a diagnostic technology company some years ago, and we were trying to figure out scaling, and I was bumping, just kept hitting my head on a ceiling. And a consultant basically looked at me, and I was the founder, and said, the founder's strength is the company's weakness. Yeah. And so exactly what you're talking about is, I can validate it through my own experience at this. I wish I'd had this conversation with you maybe about 20 years ago.
There you go. Well, that's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
So we can help others.
Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing. Now, you seem really energized. As soon as, you come to life, and the energy is visible as you talk about these things. How is it after all these years, spending all this time in this space, thinking about and talking about the things you do, how does it still excite you to this level?
Because I'm lucky, Pat. I hear literally from entrepreneurs every day. And we've touched about 70,000 now around the world with our tools. And so the odds are, and any one day, I'm going to hear from one and say, Vern, I just got to tell you, I've never met you, but I've been using your tools and ideas and reading your weekly insights, and our company's gone from here to here, and all the kind of things that I wanted for my dad, I'm seeing now happen in all these other companies. So why wouldn't you absolutely be energized?
And this is a key, I think, for people as they're going through phases of life and experience. You're not giving the same talks today that you did 10 years ago or 20 years. Like a lot of times I'm seeing...
next week, I will not give the same talk next week. So part of the problem. I wish I had a canned speech that I could get on stage and give. But
it also is the staying current and relevant thing, right? I mean, because so often there's so many entrepreneur thought leaders and so on that I've seen speak 25 years ago, and there they are giving that same talk again today. But what I'm seeing in your books and what you're talking about is that there's new information here. Now we got to focus on pricing. Now we're going to talk about how this has changed, et cetera. And how is it that you stay current? How is it that your thinking keeps advancing? Because the world is changing faster at a faster pace than it ever has, and I believe it becomes bewildering, especially for guys like me who started companies in the '80s, right? And now it's a different deal now. It can become bewildering because you have old foundations that you work from. how do you separate? Because I still think Rockefeller principles still apply. I mean, there's foundational things that will never change no matter what's going on in the world, I think, at least, and you could tell me if you agree with this. And then there's current understanding that you have to have that must be matched to it. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think, I thought Jim Collins had a beautiful framework around that, the yin and the yang of preserve the core.
Right.
And there are these foundational principles. What are your priorities? What's the data metrics and the meeting rhythm, communication around that is never going to change. But then he had to stimulate progress. And that's the stuff that can change overnight with a new technology and a disruption in the industry by a competitor. So you've got to be playing both sides of that equation. And I think you're absolutely right. The word is relevant. How do you as a leader remain relevant? And how do you keep your company products and services relevant? And that's where, to me, the role model for that's Bill Gates.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the reasons why I think it's crazy that it's both Apple and Microsoft, two of the oldest technology companies that are the two largest market cap companies right now, over $1 trillion, beating all the young guns, the Amazons and the Googles, Alphabets, and Facebooks and all that kind of stuff. And part of that I equate back, and I featured him in my second book, Greatest Business Decisions, was Bill Gates' Think Week. We all have what I call this tower of guilt. Every day, Pat, somebody's like, hey, Vern, when you got a moment, take a look at this tribute to Clayton Christensen, who just passed away this week, and watch this YouTube video, and take a look at this new book, and it just piles up. And so Bill had same situation. So twice a year, he would take, his record was 112 books, manuscripts, PhD theses, white papers, and for 18 hours a day, 7 days straight, he would just pile in that information, and he got in the flow with it, and he could begin to see the patterns and trends, and out of that were the handful of ideas. You only need to make one or two great decisions that have kept him and Microsoft relevant. I didn't know it. I know Mark Cuban since his second year in business when he had a little IT services company in Dallas, but I didn't know till I read his book and saw him years later. He has had a habit of reading for 3 hours every single day. It's that idea that if you want to be an Olympic athlete, you've got to train for 3 hours. And since we're in the brain business, you need to be training the brain. And that's where he gets his goal, just one idea every single day to help one of the 150 plus companies he either owns or invests in. Warren Buffett, on their 50th anniversary, they asked Charlie Munger, his partner, all right, how's Warren done it? How has he beat the market by a factor of 10 for 5 decades? And it was interesting. Charlie didn't hesitate a moment. He goes, it's been Warren's first priority to reserve, quote, much time for quiet reading and thinking, even at his advanced age. And so he's consuming the headlines of 50 newspapers every day, looking for those patterns and trends in the marketplace, where he's then able to place just 1 or 2 bets maybe a year. So how's it done in a practical sense? I have a piece of paper every week. And as people send me, hey, when you have a chance, watch this YouTube video, read this article, scan through this book, I park it on this one document. And then every Thursday, I take 3 hours, and that's when I write my weekly insights. And I give myself permission to watch that 4-minute video, to read through that article, to take a look at this new book that's just been sent to me. And then I synthesize it into some ideas that I share. One of the best ways to learn is to teach. And so I have this gift of some quiet reading and thinking time every single week, which we think, by the way, Pat, is probably one of the top 5 most important measurable things. I'm writing a new book about what should leaders of growth companies really measurably be doing every day with their minutes and hours, and this is one of them.
Wow, you're talking about habits, Rockefeller habits, these are certain habits they had. So these are individual habits for the leader or the person. And then I think the company probably has to have some habits also. So can you talk about habits and their role in the life of the business leader and the company as an organism?
Yeah, because what comes down to success is just the sum total of all the things you do more of, less of, or different every day. That's just it, whether it's your personal or company success. So Are you meditating every day? I mean, the research around that is absolutely clear, hopefully. If you're not meditating, you're not optimizing this very important competitive weapon in the information age. You know, what are you doing to exercise? Are you eating correctly? So there's a lot of, you know, very personal, the gratitude journal kind of exercise that we know are hands down just non-starters. If you're not doing them, you're really not maximizing your opportunities. And then we've got some of the equivalent ones inside the company. The thing we're best known for, this daily huddle, this 10 to 15 minutes that if you do it right, each minute the people who are in that huddle will save them 10 minutes. So if it's, I was just at Steelcase, they have a 7-minute huddle every morning at 9 o'clock, another one at 3 p.m. at shift change. And if you do it right, that 7 minutes will save everybody over an hour.
Wow, 10 to 1 return.
It is the ROI that you need within the organization. So it's those that we detail in first my original book and then in Scaling Up.
You know, it's interesting because I feel like, wow, okay, this is validating for me. We just went away. We do a company retreat every year, and we just, for Revealed Films, this company, we went away to Hawaii to really talk about the business, revisit everything, et cetera. You got to get into a different environment. So we live in the mountains and the snow in the winter, so it's good to get into the beach in the sun and think creatively. But one of the things for me personally, I said, okay, I'm changing my morning routine, and there's the 3 phases. It's going to be meditate, orchestrate, and then recreate. So, and I start with, so it's exactly that thing. I've got a pretty strong meditation practice. So meditate first. That's the first thing you can do in the morning. Then orchestrate. Go and orchestrate this day and how it has to happen. You have to spend the time quietly, you know, doing that. And then recreate. Go exercise. You know, do your exercise routine. So, so it sounds like I picked the right habits in the right morning based on what you're just saying.
You did, and I don't think people have to get stuck in the order or sequence.
Right.
But all the research is really clear. The folks that have achieved the most, by the way, only work intensely, deep work, for 90 minutes to 3 hours a day.
Interesting.
You know, it's Richard Branson who really puts in a very strong morning there at Necker Island, and then business is off limits really the rest of the day. They're really learning that you then need to actually get away. You can't be just lollygagging around in email and all that, because it just destroys your energy and your brain power. So you've got the sequence right. You know, get the right start, get some deep work, and then go have fun.
So if for somebody watching right now, if they're an entrepreneur and they're putting in 10 hard hours a day and they're sometimes working weekends, do they need a course correction right now?
They do. And in fact, one of the opening chapters in Scaling Up is about Alan Rudy. You know, when I met him, Alan was working 80-hour weeks, you know, building a company called, in the medical field, out of Columbus, Ohio, of all places. And when we finished with him, he was able to get all that done in 8 hours. Now, it doesn't mean you're not doing stuff the other rest of the week. We're really adamant you ought to be out doing market-facing activities, that demand side, where you're talking to customers, employees, and shopping competitors. But we're adamant you should be able to run the business a day a week.
Can you give me a couple of examples of what you found with him, how you got him from 80 to 8?
Well, the first one was the meeting rhythm. So we're really adamant that a lot of times the mistake entrepreneurs make is they'll spread out their various operating meetings throughout the week. So Monday's the leadership team, and then Tuesday's the sales meeting, and then Wednesday's the marketing meeting, and Friday's the accounting meeting. And I learned it from Rick Kay, one of my early clients, who would put them all together on Monday morning so you could get in the flow. And he got, in a series of 5 hours, everything decided that needed to be done, the sprints that everyone on his team were going to run for the rest of the week. So then he could leave at noon. He and his team could leave at noon and go out in the marketplace the rest of the week. Wow. And Alan was able to do the same thing. Number 2, their only touch point was the daily huddle. And again, if that's going to give you huge leverage, and you can get a sense of what are the headlines in my own company of what's happening today, then I know where to go and where not to go with my activities. So the foundational was a good meeting rhythm. Number 2, make sure we're measuring that which matters, both quantitative and qualitative. And then number 3, get on message. Figure out not the 10, not the 5, but the 1 priority for today, this week, this quarter, this year, and the next 10 to 25 years. And that's what that first chapter in the book details, is how we did that for Alan.
Yeah, and you're famous for the huddles, amongst many other things, as far as saying how important it is. More and more companies are becoming more and more virtual.
Yes.
So how are you applying that principle to virtual companies?
Well, thank goodness we have cell phones, and Zoom.
Yeah.
Now we don't need to see each other's faces, so we don't use the video component, but we all have a URL. It's right on my phone. I can push a button, boom, I'm in a Zoom meeting. Alarm goes off, the daily's in 5 minutes, you're in the meeting quickly, and then it's done. We're talking about a restroom break. And one of my favorite stories, so people are saying, yeah, but especially as entrepreneurs, we're in these critical meetings. So I had taken about a year to get a meeting with Tom Meredith, who was Michael Dell's CFO and then was running Dell Ventures. And so I'm heading down into Austin to meet with him. And once you know when your daily huddle is, everything just kind of forms around it. Well, I get a call from Tom's office. He needs to move my meeting up an hour. And it's going to be right when my daily huddle. I never know what time zone I'm going to be in. So I'm getting ready to go in the meeting. And my phone buzzes. It's my daily. So I jump in. Tom's like, Vern, good to meet you, da-da-da-da-da. And he said, I hope it wasn't convenient. I had to move the meeting up. I said, Tom, Paul, I have this daily. Give me just 1 second. Let me pop up, tell the team what's going on, and let me come back in. Tom told me that's one of the reasons why we're great friends today and we got to do some things together, is he said, look, anyone who's that disciplined, I want to do business with.
Right.
And I'm thinking, I need to set up a daily huddle in all my sales calls just to kind of show off our particular discipline. Right. And so there's no excuse. And if you can get done in 7 minutes what's going to take you 70, it's worth the trade-off.
Can you give me the quick structure of the 7 minutes? Like, is there okay, please.
Yeah, there is. And so it's 3 agenda items. What's up? So you want to go around, and you want to do 3 rounds, because one of the things that Google learned in terms of the effectiveness of teams is equal talk time. It's a very simple thing. If you're in a meeting and 3 people of the 8 are doing all the talking, you got a problem. And so you've got to make sure everyone's sharing. So the idea of the daily is to make sure that the 8 people are each talking. So first you do a round of what's up. And particularly, what's the most important thing you're working on today? And what the leader's thinking is, like Jim McCann, is it going to sell more flowers? Hey, here's what I'm doing. And you're thinking, but is that going to sell more flowers? And you can have that conversation after. So you get to see a pattern of people's priorities to make sure that they're focused on that's going to move the organization forward. These are the headlines. The second agenda item is kind of data. And there's something, the Homo sapiens have been around for about 200,000 years. And our goal obviously has been to survive and thrive. And so we developed some tools along the way to do that. 100,000 years ago, we developed speech. We've only had the written word 5,000 years, and we've only had Excel spreadsheets for like 50 years. So I know which one we're more highly developed in surviving and thriving, and that's talking, sharing stories. And so what you're really doing in that second round is you're saying out loud the data. What our sales are, open positions we've got, contracts we're working on, so that everyone gets a gut feel for how the business is doing. And no one can say, nobody told me. Nobody didn't tell me this. So what's up? Any of the data metrics that drive the business daily. And then number 3 is the most important agenda item. That is, where are you blocked? Where's the constraint? Where are you stuck? And it's not about sharing what you think others can help you with. It's about, most importantly, you verbalizing it. We know the brain, if you sit around and think, the midliff is firing, fight, flight, freeze, flock. Women have a much better response than men do. Only when you speak it, Pat, does your fight or flight response shut down. And you can begin lighting up the prefrontal lobes like a Christmas tree, so you can start to solve it. We're a being that needs to talk. And so by me putting out to the universe, verbally, sending out the vibrations, what I need. Why can't I get this person to call back? I can't seem to get a signature on this contract. I can't move forward until Jerry's team moves forward. And you've all experienced it. The minute I just had it happen. I'm interviewing somebody locally for our chief marketing officer, I had not heard from her for 2 months. Her mother had passed away. She needed some time at the end of the year. And we're in our strategic planning session 2 weeks ago. And that day, her name came up. Hours later, a text comes in from her. Hey, I was just thinking about you today. You've had that experience, right?
So many times I can't count them.
And we know it's real. You put out the vibrations. And if we can pick up Vikings' weak signals at the edges of our universe, the rest of us humans can pick up our verbalizations of cries for help, which is really what those stucks are. So, long answer to a short question. What's up? Quick round. What's the data driving the business? Quick round. And number 3, where are we all stuck or constrained? And the idea is not to try to solve the problem in that meeting, or it's going to go from 15 minutes to 50, and everyone's going to hate you for it. But it's to give you a guidance of, all right, where might I be most helpful to people the rest of the day? And that's the power of the daily.
There's one thing I'm wondering. I'm sure you have some rules around. So you have extroverts in the huddle. So what is the rule around saying, hey, I know maybe you'd love to have a conversation right now, but we literally are going to be done in 7 minutes. So do you tell them it's 10 seconds each round, or how do you do that?
It is literally. It's usually averages a minute per person. So if I've got 6, it's 6 minutes. If I got 15, it's going to be 15 minutes, and it's 20 seconds for each of those agenda items. And the way you start is you just have an egg timer. At Steelcase, they have a big timer that at the end of 7 minutes, these horns blare. It's almost, it scares you. You're going to learn very quickly to get to the point.
And that's how you get the discipline in it.
That's how you get the discipline. But also by going around. It's the introverts and the women, which the research show typically don't have as much opportunity to speak as the men do, the extroverted men. So that's why it's particularly important.
Wow. This is all really fascinating stuff. I feel like we could do like 10 episodes with you, actually, because I'm sure we could double click on any of these things and go deep. So, which is the virtue of reading your books. So anyway, thank you so much for sharing all this. Just one last question for you. What are you most excited about right now?
We are hitting our inflection point. We hit our 20.
You say we, are you talking about Gazelles? Or?
Well, we changed the name to Scaling Up. We actually took we realized what we need to practice what we preach. We had a stupid name for the company. It worked for a while, Gazelles, but nobody could spell it. Is it 2 Z's, 12 L's? Is there an S at the end? And so we're all in with Scaling Up, and that term seems to have hit its stride in the last 24 months. And as we teach as well, we hit our 25th anniversary. And so we're approaching our 25th anniversary. We're ready to hit the inflection point and 10x our influence out in the marketplace.
That's really exciting. Anyway, and I could see your excitement about it. So you're really energized. So I'm sure that's going to happen. But you really touched a lot of people here sharing today, and you gave very graciously. I mean, there's no holding back. I could tell that. So thanks so much I know you're busy, so thanks so much for taking the time to share with us. And I can speak personally, I got a ton out of this.
Thank you.
I can't wait to go back and start making notes around what's in my brain right now. And I'm sure that everybody that watched this did also. So thanks so much, Vern. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Pat.
Well, now you can see why Vern Harnish is a guru to so many other successful people. He really has his act together as far as his thinking, his context, his perspective, and his ability to put practical things on the ground. So thanks for tuning in to this interview with Vern Harnish. Well, that's it for episode 6 of Money Revealed 2020. As you can see, each episode in and of itself has phenomenal power and impact. It gives you information that literally can transform your life. It was amazing for me to learn all the stuff, and what's even more amazing for me is to be here with you right now and share it. So thanks for being here. I encourage you to own Money Revealed 2020, maybe even consider it as a gift for someone else. All the information's right here, but I appreciate you also being here for this free viewing period. It's a pleasure to take this journey with you. I'll see you in episode 7.
The main rule of COVID investing is look at everything that's been happening, now accelerate it. convert months to weeks, 5-year periods to 1-year periods, and then you can make investment decisions. So anything you have of a real obligation coming up, you should keep that money extremely liquid, not in any type of investment. I'm very optimistic about the economy, mainly because of the amount of what I call technology gaps. That's technology we've developed, it's on the shelf, but it's not yet on the factory floor.
I was in the corporate game and it just didn't fit. I was looking around for ways to make money. I started publishing a newsletter. At the first launch, I did $1,650 in sales. I was amazed. That was an incredible amount of money. And I had this thought right then, if I did that once, I can do it again. Eventually, a few years later, I did $34,000 in a single week for another newsletter. And it just didn't stop there.
When people say money can't buy happiness, like BS, like we have access to so much knowledge. I think one of the biggest secrets to wealth and ongoing wealth and sustainable wealth is you must continue to learn. And most people never start their own thing. They get sucked into the mediocrity, they get the mortgage, the car payment, and they got the bills, and they stay in the job.
Right.
And they never reach into themselves and find another level. You know, right now, if you go back and get your master's, on average in America, it's only about a $6,200 a year raise. I know what it's like to be broke and hope for more, have envy that others are getting ahead, feeling like you're being left behind. Even if just one person gets the inspiration to go, or one person gets a tactic that we share, that's enough.